The town of Valentine hadn't seen rain in 3 weeks, and the sky hung pale and motionless above the dirt like it was holding its breath. Dust swirled low along the street, curling around boots and wagon wheels, as if even the earth didn't want to look at what was happening. Outside the Last Day Saloon, a makeshift platform had been raised from crates and old planks, hammered together, just sturdy enough to hold shame. The crowd had gathered before noon, some out of boredom, others out of meanness, and a few with silver in their pockets and hollowness in their eyes. They watched a thin man in a whiskey-stained coat shuffle a worn deck of cards as though life were just another game. Harlan Creed was his name, and he was not the sort of man who waited for misfortune to find him. He dragged it behind him like a rickety cart filled with debts and daughters. He stood with a gambler's smirk, his mustache twitching as he called out bids not yet made. 3 strong girls, he barked. 1 for cooking, 1 for men, 1 for singing you to sleep if your soul's tired enough. The girls stood to his right, each a statue carved from a different kind of sorrow. The oldest, Molly, had her arms folded, chin lifted, eyes sharp and unblinking. She wore her pain like armor. Beside her, June looked half wild, her fingers clenched into fists, jaw twitching with unspent fire. Mabel, the youngest, stood a step behind them, eyes glazed, humming something no one else could hear, her small body swaying gently. From across the square, a man watched them from the shade of a wagon. He was 40 by 60 by gaze. His name was Thomas Granger, and most folks knew him only in passing. The man with the Pinewood Ranch past Red Hollow, the one who rarely came to town unless the well went dry or the fence split during storm season. His beard was streaked with early gray, his shoulders broad but tired. 3 grown sons sat behind him on the wagon bench, shifting uncomfortably, casting glances toward their father in the crowd. Thomas hadn't come for the auction. He came for salt, nails, and 2 pounds of coffee. But fate doesn't knock politely. It strikes like a blade and leaves you wondering why your hands are covered in blood. He watched as Molly's gaze swept the crowd, meeting eyes, daring someone to try. She had no ring on her hand, no child at her hip, no protector, just spine and grief worn like a second skin. June's lip curled at a man in a brown vest who laughed too loud. Mabel blinked at the sun, lips still moving with whatever song she carried alone. Thomas shifted his weight. The youngest girl looked like his late wife's sister had at 13, thin-boned and dainty but not delicate, just tired, worn too young by something no child should have faced. Harlan's voice rang out again. Let's not pretend they'll be virgins for long. Might as well get them before the saloon keepers do. I'll start the bidding at $15 apiece or $40 for the lot. There was a silence then, not the kind that falls naturally, but the kind pulled out of a room like breath sucked from lungs. No one spoke. Even the wind paused. Thomas stepped down from the wagon. His boots stirred dust as he walked, slow and deliberate, past town men who suddenly found their shoes or sky worth examining. He didn't speak until he reached the platform. Untie them, he said simply. Harlan blinked. What? Thomas's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Untie your daughters and get off that platform before I knock you into next week. Harlan scoffed. Who the hell do you think you are? A man who's had enough of cowards selling what they broke and claiming it's still whole, he said. He turned to the crowd. You all came to watch. I hope you choke on what you saw. This ain't a stage and they ain't cattle. Harlan's hand twitched toward his coat, but Thomas's stare landed like a rifle barrel. The gambler faltered, then spat at the planks and stepped back, grumbling curses into his collar. The girls didn't move. Thomas looked to Molly. You're free to go, but if you got nowhere to be, I have a house with rooms that don't leak. I've got sons who can keep to themselves and soup that doesn't run thin. You won't owe me anything. Molly's eyes narrowed. Why? Because someone should have stopped him a long time ago. And because I got nothing to gain by standing here. He turned then, walking back toward the wagon as the crowd parted around him like sheep who suddenly remembered the wolf in their midst. For a moment, nothing moved. Then Molly stepped down. Her sisters followed, Mabel still humming. They climbed into the back of the wagon, settling between bags of feed and coils of rope. None of them spoke. Thomas didn't look back. The road out of town was narrow and lined with brittle cottonwoods. The wagon creaked. Caleb, the youngest son, kept glancing over his shoulder, trying not to stare. Mark offered Mabel a wrapped candy from his pocket. She took it with a small nod, unwrapped it like it might disappear. At the ranch, the porch sagged slightly from age, but it was clean. A yellow dog barked once and wagged his tail. The sun was starting to dip and shadows leaned long across the yard. Thomas showed them the house. One room for each girl, beds made, windows shuttered. Nothing fancy, June muttered. Is this a prison or a favor? Whatever you need it to be, Thomas replied. He left them there unsupervised. That night, he slept in the barn. The next morning came soft, with pale light filtering through the kitchen window. Molly stood by the stove, V staring at the unlit firebox. June was already outside kicking at stones. Mabel sat in a corner with a dull spoon and a tin plate, tapping it softly like a drum. Thomas stood in the doorway, a mug of coffee in hand. His eldest son, Levi, leaned beside him. What are we supposed to do? Levi asked, not with resentment, just quiet confusion. Let them breathe, Thomas said. They did. Days passed like drifting leaves. The girls didn't speak much. They ate, helped where asked, but kept to themselves. Thomas never pressed. Then one evening Molly sat on the porch after supper, arms wrapped around her knees. The sun sank behind the hills, painting the fields gold and blood. Thomas sat beside her, silent. She spoke first. You got no idea what he did to us. No, he said, and I don't need to. You're here now. Molly looked at him, something fierce and flickering in her eyes. You can't save people like us. I ain't trying to save you, he said, just giving you somewhere to stop running. She looked down, her fingers curled around the porch rail. You think we're fit to be around your sons? I think you're fit to be anywhere you damn well choose. There was a long pause, then she nodded once. Then we'll stay, she said. For now. Thomas rose, his knees creaking. That's enough. Behind them, fireflies blinked into the dusk, lighting the yard with tiny, careless sparks. Inside, Mabel's voice could be heard humming again, softer this time. And June, somewhere out near the barn, let loose a laugh no one expected. Thomas looked toward the horizon where night was swallowing the light. 3 sisters had come to him like strays at the door, and he'd opened it without knowing why. But some things don't need reasons, only a little room, and a man willing to remember that mercy, like rain, comes slow, but softens even the hardest land.